So, let's talk about a really wild story. It's about how an entire industry was basically criminalized overnight. And the crazy part? It wasn't for what people were doing, but for what they had already done.
Seriously, just imagine this for a second. You start a business, you follow all the rules, you pay your taxes, you're a success story. And then, years down the road, the government turns around and says, you know all that stuff you did? Yeah, that was illegal from the very beginning. This isn't some dystopian movie plot. This is exactly what happened to thousands of people in China.
All right, to really get how this could even happen, we need to rewind the clock a bit. We're going back to a time, and not that long ago, when the scene was completely different. So before 2017, the crypto scene in China was booming. It was in this kind of gray but tolerated zone, which, is pretty normal for new industries over there. You had exchanges operating openly in big cities, run by young entrepreneurs. They were paying their taxes, following the rules as they existed, and get this, local governments were actually sort of encouraging it. Why? Well, it was simple. It created jobs, pumped up the local GDP, and brought in a ton of tech talent. And I really want to stress this point. These weren't some rebels or anti-government activists. Not at all. These were just entrepreneurs trying to innovate within the system. They fully expected the government to create new rules eventually, and they were ready to follow them. They were playing by the book, the book as it was written at the time.
And then the rug got pulled out from under them. The change that came wasn't about new rules for the future. No, it was about rewriting history. Okay, so here's the timeline. In 2017, China announces a ban on domestic crypto exchanges. And you might think, okay, a new rule going forward. Makes sense. But that's not what happened. The really critical part is what came next. Between 2018 and 2021, the authorities started using that 2017 ban and applying it retroactively. They started going after people for things they did before the ban was even in place, when their actions were completely and totally legal. This whole tactic just throws a fundamental legal principle right out the window. It's called non-retroactivity, and it's basically the cornerstone of legal fairness almost everywhere. The idea is simple. You can't be punished for something that wasn't a crime when you did it. It's like changing the rules of a game after it's already over. But that is exactly what they did. And this is where you can really see the legal gymnastics they pulled. Look at this. On one side, you have what these entrepreneurs actually did before 2017. They operated licensed exchanges. They paid taxes. On the other side, you have what the state decided to call it after 2018. Suddenly, operating a licensed exchange became illegal business operations. And paying taxes on profits, that became a criminal act. It's just wild. Their past compliance was twisted into evidence of a crime.
So you're probably asking, how could they possibly justify this? Well, they came up with something pretty clever, in a scary way. They said the victim wasn't a person. The victim was an abstract concept, the national financial order. See what that does? If the victim is just an idea, you don't need to prove that any specific person was harmed. All you need is the evidence of the business itself. The very records that once proved their success were now the only proof needed to convict them. So this wasn't just some abstract legal debate. This theory had absolutely devastating, real-world consequences for thousands and thousands of people. We're talking 100% confiscation. The authorities seized everything, not just the crypto in their wallets. We're talking past profits, money in their bank accounts, anything that could be even remotely related. They didn't even try to separate what was earned legally at the time. It was a total financial wipeout. Everything just gone. And the punishment, it didn't just stop with money. It became a generational curse. First, you get a criminal record. That's a huge deal. It means you are now banned from any government job for life. But it gets worse. This follows your family. Your kids suddenly face massive hurdles trying to get into good schools or finding decent jobs. It's a punishment that echoes down through the family. It was basically social hell. Spouses started getting intense pressure at their jobs. Kids were being monitored at school. Entire families were officially labeled as problematic households. And the pressure was just unbearable. In tech hubs like Shenzhen and Hangzhou, it led to a heartbreaking wave of divorces, family betrayals, and even suicides. And this quote really says it all. The anger has nowhere to go. It doesn't explode, but the trust never returns. Think about that. You can't protest, you can't fight back, because that would just make things worse. So all that anger, all that betrayal, it just sits there. It's this silent wound that never heals. And the trust people had in the system, it's just gone. Forever. So why?
Why would the state go to these insane lengths? Why reach back in time like this? Well, the real motivation wasn't about chaos or protecting people.
It was about one thing: control. The state had some very clear goals. First, stop capital from flowing out of the country. Second, protect the value of their own currency, the yuan. Third, and this is a big one, crush any and all competition for their upcoming digital yuan. So what this whole crackdown really was, it was a message. A very loud, very clear message that all wealth, whether it's past or present, is ultimately under state control. Period.
So you see, this wasn't about banning a risk. It was about crushing a rival. The private crypto world wasn't a problem to be managed. It was a competitor that had to be completely eliminated. So let's talk about the aftermath. What's the lasting legacy of this whole thing? Because this event left a permanent scar on the mindset of an entire generation of entrepreneurs in China. This is maybe the most important takeaway. It created a totally new social contract. The old question an entrepreneur would ask was, is this legal right now? The new question is much scarier. Will the state dislike this in the future? The actual law today doesn't even matter anymore. What matters is trying to guess the political winds of tomorrow. And that leads to a whole new set of rules for survival. You don't plan for the long term anymore. You take quick profits and you get out. You don't commit deeply to any one thing. And most importantly, you do not form strong networks or communities because that could be seen as a threat. The result isn't a rebellion, it's a society built on distrust, where everyone is just looking out for themselves. The lesson here is absolutely chilling. A whole generation learned that the law is not a shield to protect you. It's a tool the state can and will use against you whenever it wants. And that really leaves us with the final haunting question, doesn't it? What happens to a society when people learn that the law is not their shield, but a weapon that can be aimed right at them? That's the legacy of this crackdown, a deep, quiet distrust that might never, ever go away.